Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Anthony Schmutt from Tyndall Oliver. Quick little introduction. Let you guys know that, I'm not sharing my screen yet. Share monitor 1 and share. Dennis, let me know. Are you able to see my email?
Yes.
Okay. So everyone received the notice for the webinar today along with some links and some additional information. Dennis's email as well as mine is included in that. The most important thing I would say in there, besides Dennis's email, of course, is the login link if you'd like somebody else to be able to join future webinars, and our webpage address. When you click on the webpage address, this answers the question, where are the presentations going to be posted? Where is the recording posted? On this webpage further along the road, further down, we have all the recordings and the PowerPoints of the PDFs for all the webinars that we've done since 2013 are all here. At the top, we have the upcoming presentation topics. Today's topic is why and how we use benefit, cost, and net present value to evaluate safety projects, presented by me. Down at the bottom of this webinar also there is a resource document that has the PDH request form if you're a professional engineer seeking hours for your professional development. I believe in your GoToWebinar window there is a download link as well. It is posted as a resource on there. With that, let me hand it over to Dennis for his official intro of the webinar, and then he'll hand it back to me for the actual presentation.
On my screen. Good morning. This is Dennis Staloon, and just wanted to welcome you all. And this is the 9th District 7 Safety Academy webinar for 2016. Today's webinar topic is why and how the benefit, cost, and net present value are used to evaluate your proposed safety project. Today we'll be presented by Anthony Schmutt, PE, with Tyndall Oliver in Tampa, Florida. Also would like to just briefly go through my little intro. And this is the District 7 Safety Academy. And also this academy was established so this we had a way to share through webinars, provide information related to your safety issues to enhance your local safety program in your area. Overall, the Academy began this year, the 4th year of it, in January. It's a window of 2 hours. Most of them run about an hour or no more than 2 hours. And they will end for 2016 on November 16th will be the last one. And also on the same page, Anthony has already mentioned about registering, and also where you can go to the web page and you can see the listing of the prior webinars and the recordings of it. And like I mentioned today, we are going to have why and how the benefit, cost, and net present value are used to evaluate safety projects. And you'll notice that we have 3 remaining webinars for 2016. The webinar is being processed for AICP credits, and also I wanted to mention the District 7 Safety Academy is in the process of collecting and gathering up information for 2017 topics. And I wanted to mention to the attendees that if any of you out there have any topics that you feel that we have not covered and you think we should, if you could drop me an email and give me the title of the topic and possible presenter, I'd be more than happy to consider that as we go through our process of selection for 2017. So if you can make a note of that, if you're interested, I appreciate it very much. For the professional engineers, we do have the ability to give you PDHs, and this is the process of once you do it. And Anthony mentioned the form on the website. And with that, Here's my contact information. I'm going to turn it back over to Anthony.
Great. Yeah, I'll make myself the presenter here.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a good comment about if anybody has any topics that they would like for us to talk about or anybody to present about. We like having folks from all over, and we're here to serve the community, and it's for users by users. I mean, I'm one of the safety guys that's out there doing projects. We have other folks from the cities and from the MPOs and DOT and FHWA that have presented, and the whole concept is driving down fatalities through knowledge sharing. So absolutely, I mean, shoot us some emails and let us know what's happening if there's any topics that we're not covering or anything that we've covered in the past that you'd like us to revamp because there's been changes to the topic itself. Those are all good things to talk about. A quick note, I wanted to let you guys know if you have questions along the way, I will be monitoring the chat while I'm doing the presentation, pulling a little bit of double duty, so I should be able to answer your questions along the way. And at the end, I mean, hopefully we have a good Q&A session at the end. I know that there's a few of our prior presenters and experts in the chat room that are attending today that I've recognized a lot of the names. We can always unmute a couple of folks at the end and have a dialogue, some upcoming changes and things perhaps that I might have missed as I'm going along with this. So Dennis did an intro for me. Again, I'm Anthony Schmont from Tyndall Oliver. We do safety engineering here for a couple of folks, primarily DOT. We do a lot of work in District 7 and District 4. And through our experience with traffic operations, we've kind of become good at this benefit cost thing. So I'm here today to talk to you guys about the whys and the hows and some of the pitfalls that you'll get into when you're evaluating projects. Looking at our agenda for what we're talking about. Oh, my slide. There we go. I'm gonna look at some theory and data elements as we're going along. Hopefully, I don't bounce back and forth too much. I'm gonna try to keep myself, on my path as I'm going through here. But I do want to interject side notes and experiences that we've come across as we're doing things. I want to look at correctable crashes. How do we select those? I want to look at crash modification factors, the sources, where those come from, and the ones that we should be using, some pitfalls with that. Those are honestly, I think that the two circles are the most challenging items when doing a benefit cost calculation, as the correctable crashes and the crash modification, because frankly there's more than one methodology, and in my experience those things are not always wrong. There isn't one way that is right and one way that is wrong. There are just different methodologies and different preferences. Different is not always wrong, it's just different. So there's a point that I'm going to really drive home at the end of the webinar. That's if you take anything away from the webinar, stick around until the end and see my closing comments, because there's something that I think helps everybody along with this because of those different preferences, and I'll get into a little bit later. The crash costs, estimated costs, which I'm not as strong at in the estimated costs. I'm going to kind of gloss over that as we're doing this. I don't do engineering estimates, but there are different methods of doing that. And then as I'm going through the entire presentation, my goal is to go through a practical example of the topics and interweave an actual problem, so that it's not just theory. As we're talking, we're going to look at an actual example, an actual live project that we have going right now. So getting into our correctable crashes, the topic today is not, crash data systems and where the crashes come from, but just very briefly, I want to mention sort of the life cycle of a crash to make sure that everyone that is in the chat knows, where the crashes are coming from. There are other topics in the Safety Academy. If you're interested specifically about crash data, how to select them and things like that, look for those topics, or if it's one that you'd like us to do again, we can do trainings on those. But generally speaking, a crash happens out on the road and a police officer investigates. They fill out a report Most of them are now electronic in the state of Florida. I think we're up to 85% or so. Those crashes get reported to the Department of Highway Safety Motor Vehicles, HSMV. They are the custodians of the crash data. They own all the data. Everything has to be reported to them. They have a consultant that manages the Florida Integrated Reporting Exchange System, or FIRES. And FIRES is the source of data for, it's kind of the arm that delivers the data to the different users. There's a few data systems that I'm familiar with. Our own crash data management system, the CDMS that was created in-house sort of for us to do our own studies, and over time our users, our clients began using it. So we have a small base of users that QC your data basically with the CDMS, and they're able to run their own exports. Signal 4 Analytics out of UF is a great system that has a direct link to the FIRES database. You're able to query crashes out of their system as well. They've got some analytical tools. It's a great tool. And the Crash Analysis Reporting System, or CARS, which is out of DOT. This is their mainframe. There's pluses and minuses to using each system, and again, I'm not going to get into them too much, but at the end, the purple dot, that's you guys, the end users. So through this process is how the crashes end up in our hands, and then we do our benefit cost calculations off of those things. So practical example, let's just get right to the thing that we're going to talk about before we get into a whole lot of theory. In District 7, there is a local roads highway safety improvement program, HSIP. We have an annual safety summit, and there's this whole process that we do to get the local agencies to submit projects. And I'm actually going to use one of the active projects that we're in review right now. We haven't finalized the response letters or anything. So if you're listening right now, you'll get to know the answer to your pre-application. But this process allows local agencies in the district to submit a project request, and then the safety engineers from the DOT and the consultants get those projects and then do a preliminary safety evaluation of them. And that's the stage that this project is in. Then those projects eventually get applied for central office. They go to FHWA for funding. But the project is in Citrus County. It is, the request that has come in is to convert a 7-lane turn lane section of road. It's 3 lanes each direction with a 2-way left turn lane to be turned into raised medians. So it's access management project basically. And also along it, the people that put in the application said, look at the traffic signals to see if there's any modifications that should be made, acknowledging that when you prohibit direct left turns out of driveways by adding raised medians and 2-way left or directional left turns, you're going to have additional U-turns, and those are going to get pushed to the traffic signals. So where is this project? It's up in Citrus County and Beverly Hills. It's County Road 491 between State Route 44 and US 41. Well, the actual project is much smaller than that, but this is a big picture of where it is. On the aerial, you can kind of see what's going on. There is, to the south, kind of south of 44. It's fairly rural through that area. County Road 491 is a 2-lane undivided roadway through that section. And then to the north of the area that's labeled Beverly Hills, where all the development is fairly rural as well. That's a 2-lane divided. And you get to this section in Beverly Hills where it's just you have a nice little booming community in that area. And County Road 491 expands from a 2-lane undivided to a 7-lane roadway. The actual project, when we're zooming in a little bit farther, is about 1,000 feet. It's between 2 signalized intersections, Truman Boulevard and Mustang Boulevard. There are lots of things along this corridor. There's a good bit of volume through there. If you look at the street view, this is what it looks like. It's your typical, 3 lanes one way, 3 lanes the other way, and 2-way left turn lanes. This is looking north at one of the traffic signals. That's why it looks like it's just a turn lane on the other side of the two yellow lines. There's a Winn-Dixie shopping plaza, there's a CVS and a Walgreens, there's a few banks, there's a Dollar General, there's all sorts of things coming along here, with the driveways that are along the corridor. So going through the project then, and the point of this is let's look at our BC. What are we going to do? So if you remember how we started, it was correctable crashes. The first thing we're going to do is figure out how many crashes, because that's the name of the game. I mean, the benefit cost in the end, it's somewhat of a cold calculation, but it's the only way that we can prioritize our limited funds, and that is to find the projects that have the most benefit ratio compared to the cost. So in this example, I'm going to use the crash data management system to pull the crashes. Logging into the system takes you to an interface that allows you to draw a box and select your years. I pulled a 3-year crash history, drawing a geographic extent around the corridor. This is very similar to what you would do in Signal 4 or any of the other systems that have the data. When the crashes are selected, gives you the number of crashes, gives you some attributes for them, and those crashes get exported then so that we can analyze them. There's some collision diagram type symbols that show up there. You can kind of see there's some angles and there's some left turns, there's some injury crashes. The different colors mean different things in each of the systems. The data attributes can be exported. These are the actual attributes that are in the police reports that the officers fill out. So we can get very detailed in looking at the actual data, when we're looking at this and trying to figure things out. The systems also allow you to visualize the actual crashes on the map. This allows us to see, if it makes sense to do the improvement at the locations that the improvements are being done. So, you can visualize them on a map. That's great. Even more detailed than that, if we wanted to look at the actual attributes, if something doesn't make sense, to make sure that the data is correct, we have access to the scanned police reports, and we're able to see the scanned police reports to see what's happening there. Even more detailed, we have the police narrative. The officers always write, a paragraph. Vehicle 1 was traveling northbound along County Road 491, X number of feet south of Truman Boulevard. Then they tell you exactly what happened in that crash. So this really builds a detailed picture. And then there's actually a drawing of the crash. It lets you know, here's a driveway. This car was traveling, in this direction. He hit. They ended up, wherever it is that they were going. When you're looking at this, always make sure to glance at the north arrow, because sometimes these drawings are upside down. But wait a minute. We're kind of going down a rabbit hole here. We've just pulled the crashes, and we're all of a sudden looking at crashes. We're reading reports. But why? Why are we looking at these specifically? We need to always begin with an end in mind, and it's not just pull the crashes and look at everything very cookie cutter. It's not how many crashes. What we're looking for is the correctable. Why are we looking at them? How detailed of a review do we actually need? And that varies greatly. That's one of the key points when we're looking at benefit cost analysis, is how detailed of a review. And this will vary project to project, and it'll vary depending on whoever it is that you're doing the report for. There's some agencies that I've worked for that like a high level analysis, and there's some that get down to the nitty gritty and actually look at the individual crashes and tell me that one would have been corrected, that one would have been corrected, as opposed to a large picture data. So again, it's the correctable crashes. That's the point of this for the calculating the benefit. So what is the improvement again? This is only a 2-lane section, not a 7-lane section. I couldn't find a before and after picture of that. But effectively, this is what's going to be done along the corridor. It starts out as a undivided roadway with painted medians, and it's going to end up a divided roadway with raised medians. So why are we doing this? Is that a good project along this corridor? Well, I mean, I think so. So far, I'm liking what I'm seeing, for this project, just based on the street view and based on the aerials. On the left here, we have the possible conflict points of a full median opening along a T intersection. There's 11 conflict points that are highlighted in red at that diagram. And if you see a directional left turn, the types of things that will be done along this corridor, you end up with 7 conflict points. It's much fewer. I'm sorry, 6. You end up with 6 conflict points. It's much fewer, and that greatly reduces the potential for having crashes because you're eliminating possible movements. So good project. I like it so far. Is this an appropriate improvement? I think so. Are the project limits appropriate? So, the other thing that I kind of like to do is just, holistically look at everything. Look at the crashes that are a little bit to the north, a little bit to the south. Look at parallel corridors to see if it, fits everything. We don't just want to do this giant improvement at one location and then downstream there's another location that geometrically is very similar to this. Maybe instead of a Winn-Dixie, there's a Publix down the street, and it has the same issues. So I kind of did that looking at this project, and this 7-lane painted median section extends to the south of the proposed or requested project, I guess in this case, about 500 feet to the south. There's some turn lanes there, and you can see in the aerial the yellow line, and then to the south of this, where you can't see anymore in the aerial, the lanes start to drop off, and you end up with that 2-lane section of roadway, and there's actually a grass median in that section. So, if I was looking at this, that CVS drive, that CVS surely would have, people coming in and out of it. So I would consider maybe extending this project further to the south and, seeing if there's enough crashes to justify an additional expense going down and making this a larger project. The same thing if you look to the north. To the north along this corridor, the 7-lane segment extends around 2,500 feet. It's 3 times the length of the actual project that is being requested. So I think that I would really look at the crash data closely at this corridor. Look at the access points. This would require public involvement. It's a big project that's coming along. If we're doing almost a mile of improvements along here, but are there enough crashes? Is it appropriate? Why are we doing it only from Truman to Mustang when we could do it further north? I pulled the data along that, and I saw there's a good number of crashes. Your angle crashes and your crashes that are most likely to be corrected by the elimination of those conflict points along the requested segment. In a 3-year period, there were 5 angle crashes. Along the expanded segment, there were 12. So it's a good number of crashes. That accounts for 26% of the crashes. Statewide, about 19% are angle crashes, and we have 26% along this corridor. So both in the requested and the expanded segment, we have an overrepresentation of one of the types of crashes that generally leads to the highest injury severity. That's the numbers that are highlighted in red. So, in the requested corridor, if you look at all the crashes, there's 14 total, and in the expanded segment, there's 45 total. So, I'm leaning towards, when I'm doing my preliminary evaluation, I'll pull it by the requested, but I'm going to spend a little bit of extra time on this one and see if perhaps we can justify expanding this improvement a little bit further north. It's going to take some coordination to do that. Looking at a couple of other attributes, the relation to intersection, another field that is available in the crash data. This kind of lets us know non-junction has quite a few crashes. There's 8 in the prior out of the 14. That's 60% of the crashes, and 25 crashes in the after expanded segment, which accounts for 55% of the crashes. So the ratio is holding pretty true. And if you think back to the improvement, our improvement along this corridor is access management and median modifications, which tend to fix crashes that are not at intersection or non-junction. So 60% of the crashes along this corridor are non-junction. This to me, we don't want crashes, but from a proactively identifying a project, this is looking pretty good. The crash data is lining up with saying that this is probably going to be a good project. I hope as we're going through this, of course I know the answer, but I hope as we're going through this that we end up with a good benefit to cost ratio, for both the requested and the expanded segment. So these are the types of thought processes. You're looking at your projects, you're looking at your corridors, and it's not cookie cutter. I didn't bring up lighting, I didn't bring up bike pit crashes, I went straight to the overall, looked at the angles, and I went to the relation to junction and looked at where the crashes are happening. We've got driveway crashes, we have non-junction. So this is falling in line with the type of thought process that you want to do to make sure that things are making sense. So to get our correctable crashes, let's talk a little bit about crash modification factors. This is an acronym to be careful about because there is another acronym that you'll see later on that is also CMF. So just keep in mind whenever you see CMF to know what it is that you're talking about. From the clearinghouse, it says that a crash modification factor is a measure of the safety effectiveness of a particular treatment or design element. It is a percentage crash reduction that might be expected after implementing a given countermeasure. So the crash reduction factor and the crash modification factor are related to each other. Simply put, the number of crashes that would be corrected multiplied by the crash modification factor give you the crashes that can be corrected. And that's the number that we need. Again, it was those correctable crashes. That's the number that we need for the improvements. That's the number that we need. Make sure there's no questions in the chat or anything. Yeah, okay, we're good. There are a few different sources for crash modification factors. The Highway Safety Manual is kind of the preferred location to get these days, but we don't have an electronic version of that. So for this presentation, I'm going to show some examples from the CMF Clearinghouse, which they match for the most part. They're electronic, and the FHWA has a couple of sources as well. They're listed on there, but the Highway Safety Manual, the Crash Modification Clearinghouse, it's an FHWA resource, has these in there as well. And the way that these are generated, there's studies that are done throughout the state, and they do before and after studies after an improvement is done at a location, and they say, well, we had this segment of road and we did this to it, and this is the before crashes and these are the after crashes, and this is the types of crashes that were reduced. We increased these types of crashes, which can happen. I'll get into that a little bit as well, and the aggregate of all of the improvements that are being done at different places, bring up these crash modification factors. The Clearinghouse is a fairly powerful tool that lets you just search by keyword and brings up things, possible studies. There is a challenge in it though, because picking a crash modification factor is an art in of itself. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about this. It's electronic and it's a keyword search, and again, thinking back to it's these studies that are being done throughout the nation. There's more than one study being done throughout the nation, and they've got slightly different terminology in in the wording and the things as you're finding them. There on the right, we have a screen cap of the actual CMF Clearinghouse results when you search for the words raised median. Raised medians bring up install raised median, provide raised median, replace two-way left turn lane with raised median, which sounds promising because that's what we're doing for our project, as well as convert a two-way left turn lane to a raised median. The differences between install and provide are subtle. The differences between replace and convert are subtle as well. There's another example that I don't remember if I screen capped it actually or not. I'll mention it if I have it later in the presentation. I apologize for getting ahead of myself, but bike lanes is a really interesting one. That if you install bike lanes, it gives you one modification that is positive, and if you provide bike lanes, it gives you another modification that is negative. So depending on how it was actually done, you can either increase or decrease crashes if you're installing or providing. And each of these studies that are provided in the Clearinghouse and the Highway Safety Manual and everywhere, they have references to all these things. And it allows you to actually read the study itself. Sometimes it's because one was in an urban environment, one was in a rural environment, so it's very different in those locations. You kind of have to read the before and after conditions to find out the specifics about it. But looking at some of those, this is the install raised median, for example. The numbers are small on the right, so I kind of picked out some of them and highlighted them on the left. If you install a raised median, you should expect a 39% reduction of all crashes. If you install a raised median, you should expect a 44% reduction of fatal and serious crashes, 70% reduction of all urban crashes, 55% reduction of angle urban crashes, and 19% reduction of fatal, serious, and minor injury crashes in the urban environment. I mean, just in this first one, it brings up a really interesting question that if you have fatal and injury crashes, you know, and say that we are within this boundary and we're just looking at the first two, you're reducing 39% of all, but you're also reducing 44% of fatal and serious. Serious in this case is in the police report, injury severity number 4. That's the incapacitating injury. The terminology that is being used these days is serious injury, though that means incap injury. So what should be done in that case, if you happen to have a lot of fatal and serious injury crashes, is to apply a 44% reduction to those crashes and a 39% reduction to the rest of them, excluding the fatal crashes. You never want to double count your crashes. If you're in an urban environment, though, you're looking at a 70% reduction of all. So it wouldn't make sense if you want to try to maximize your improvement to apply a 44% reduction to your fatals if you're in the urban environment, if your reduction is a 70% of all. I mean, if we continue down this train of thought, the 19% is for urban environment, as is the 70% of all. So, you know, we'd really have to read the study itself to find out what was happening, because conceptually, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense that you would reduce with a raised median a less percentage of fatal and serious crashes than you would all crashes overall. Your fatal and serious injury crashes tend to be your angles, your left turns, things of that nature, and you should reduce a higher percentage. So, I mean, just in this first one, we haven't even looked at the other 6 or the other 3 that we pulled. I mean, there's already some questions. You know, which one do we use? So we need to use some common sense when we're looking at these. But let's look at some of the other numbers. We have a 22% reduction if we provide a raised median. We have a 19% increase. It is a negative reduction. Negative reductions mean crashes go up. Of property damage only crashes. You know, it doesn't say rear ends, but the rear ends and side swipes tend to be your property damage only crashes. So, you know, I don't know if providing a raised median would do that, but there was a study that had an increase in crashes. There's a 12% reduction of serious and minor injury. There's an 18% reduction of PDOs in the rural area. Replacing a two-way left turn lane. This one gets specific and is actually looking at crash types. We're looking at angles, rear ends, side swipes, and head-ons. The top category is kind of a swath. I mean, I don't know why they didn't just say all, but we have angles, fixed object, head-on, rear end, run off road, and side swipe. You know, I like the ones that are more specific. When I'm doing these, my preference is, if at all possible, to stay away from the, you know, 60% reduction of all crashes. I mean, that it's a good basis if you want to just get a ballpark figure for what's happening along your study corridor. But, you know, I like to be fair about it and actually reduce the crashes and count the crashes that are actually going to be reduced. If you think about a two-way left turn lane, I notice this one actually has a reduction in rear end crashes, whereas the other one had an increase in rear end crashes. But angle crashes, definitely. I mean, conceptually, one might say, well, 100% of angle crashes are reduced at any given location specifically, where you install a raised median, because no one's going to drive over that raised median, therefore eliminating the possibility of an angle crash. But the crash modification factor has a 36%, because they kind of do an overall corridor wide as opposed to an individual specific location by location. Your rear ends, you know, maybe make sense, because when you have better access management, that's kind of what this is about. People flow down the corridor. You know, you're not stopping as often to make that left turn. There's not people coming out of driveways making direct left turns, so conflicts are reduced. The side swipes as well. I mean, you don't have as many folks that would be driving down the corridor saying, oh, there's the place I need to turn, and just, you know, change lanes along a 7-lane segment of roadway, especially. access management would be good. I feel that sideswipe crashes would be reduced. Head-on crashes is the highest reduction, and that makes sense. I don't believe we had any head-on crashes along this corridor, but unless you've got a pretty bad median crossover, you're not going to have a reduction of crashes. They can happen. That's why it's not 100% reduction, but it's a 47%. I feel pretty good about the replaced two-way left turn lane. If you compare some of those numbers, these kind of make sense. They're a little bit lower, more conservative. I like going with the conservative numbers first and seeing how my benefit cost comes out. If I'm conservative up front with my assumptions and my benefit cost is favorable, then I stop there. That's fine. I looked at an overall. I was following the methodology, and I came out with a good benefit cost. Converting a two-way left turn lane gives you some similar numbers. We have a high reduction of head-on crashes. We have a reduction of fatal and serious injury crashes that's in the 30s, and a 47% reduction of all that I feel is kind of high for all crashes. That 33% reduction of fatal and serious kind of goes along with the, I think it was in the 30s in the prior slide for the angle crashes. So those are typically your fatal and serious injury crashes. So I look for places where multiple crash modifications kind of go in line with each other when you're selecting these. Along the corridor as well, we were looking at more than one thing, right? They said take a look at traffic signals. I noticed along that corridor that you don't have a primary signal indication per lane. So if we were to rebuild the signals along the corridor as well, and we added a primary signal head, this says that we have a 28% reduction of all crashes, which seems kind of high for adding a primary signal head. 17% reduction of fatal and serious. That's increasing in conspicuity of the traffic signal. People are less likely to run the red lights, which reduces your high crashes. 28% reduction of rear end. I like that one. The rear end crashes are reduced when you increase the conspicuity as well, and a 35% reduction of angle. And then the one that gets thrown into almost every time that we touch signals is this kind of magical CMF that is in the clearinghouse. It says that if you add a 3-inch yellow reflective back plate at a signalized intersection, you have a 15% reduction of all crashes, which, I guess that's not terrible. 15% isn't super high. I would love to see a little bit lower number for this, but know that there's improvements out there that you can, without being incorrect, say that you're looking at a 15% reduction of your signalized intersection crashes. If you have an east-west corridor, and you're having crashes along particularly on the east-west, due to the lights, the sun setting. If you have a night, a dark corridor also, the retroreflective backplates increase the nighttime visibility of signals tremendously. If you have trees and things in the background, it's just this increases the visibility, so it's a good modification. So, there's a lot of things there. Some of those might have been contradicting each other. Are there contradicting CMFs? This is where I talk about installing bike lanes. I think that this is really interesting because if you install a bike lane, you can see the numbers there on the left side. You have a 5% increase in urban crashes and a 14% increase in fatal and serious injury crashes, which I find really interesting, and that's of all crashes. In the same grouping, though, down at the bottom, if you look at vehicle-bicycle related crashes, you have a 58% decrease. And if you provide bike lanes, you have a 35% decrease in fatal, serious, and injury bicycle crashes. So it's, you kind of have to use some common sense and figure out, which ones you're going to use when you're doing this. Perhaps what was happening in that location that had a slight increase. I kind of read this as install bike lanes is a location that didn't have bike lanes at all, and now you added a shoulder and installed a bike lane, so you had no bikes whatsoever, and now you have bikes that are able to travel safely along the corridor in a bike lane. So you increase the raw number of crashes, but I bet that the crash rate is down tremendously. It's much, much safer to have bike lanes than not to have bike lanes. So, there's some of these things I wouldn't want to say well, there's an increase in crashes, so we don't want to install bike lanes. I mean, that's not the point of this. We want to use our common sense to say that there's going to be a reduction of them, of the bike crashes, if we provide a proper facility for them to travel along. New traffic signal is also an interesting one. To watch out for those negative reductions. Conceptually, if you walk through this as well, installing a new traffic signal has a 77% reduction in angle crashes. That's awfully high, but that makes sense because what a traffic signal does is designate the right of way. Unless someone is running that red light, there shouldn't be an angle crash at a traffic signal. We all know they happen, but versus a location that is having a lot of angle crashes that meets the traffic signal warrants, you should have close to a 77% reduction of angle crashes. But guess what happens a lot at traffic signals? Rear end crashes. Up to a 58% increase in rear end crashes. And personally, from a crash injury standpoint, I would trade an angle crash for a rear end any day. Angle crashes are much more severe, much more likely to cause injuries and higher vehicle damage and property. I mean, just everything. Angle crashes often end up over on the sidewalk, or where they're hitting the traffic signal poles, they're knocking over controller cabinets, they're running over pedestrians that are waiting on the side of the road. Rear end crashes are your fender benders. You pay your deductible, you get a new bumper in your car, and you go along your way, and there's no injuries. So I would definitely trade a 77% reduction in angle for a 58% increase in rear ends. But the point is, watch out for those negative reductions because they happen. So what do we do then at our project location? I mean, we've been talking theory a little bit. Let's go back to our project location. What I would suggest along this location to start out fairly conservative is maybe using that two-way left turn lane one that looked at the individual crash types. I like looking at those first as opposed to the all. And I would split the corridor into segments, one to not double count, but also we're doing very different things along the medians, and we're not influencing at all the signalized intersections. So even though the crash modification says 36% reduction of angle and left turn crashes, I would actually look at only angle and left turn crashes that are away from traffic signals, because the median modification is not going to help a traffic signal. Same thing for rear end, side swipes, and fixed objects. Those all come from the two-way left turn lane modifications. The signal-related crash modifications, 35% angle, 28% rear end, and 15% of other, that's from adding that additional signal head for retiming the corridor and adding those backplates. You kind of have a small decrease in those crashes. Do not double count your crashes. I mean, this is something that we see fairly regularly, and it's just easy to miss because very few times are we doing a project that is as simple as we're doing one thing and we use one crash modification factor and that's it. It's always challenging because we have all these things that we're doing and we need to find ones that work, and it's important to not take the same crash and reduce that same crash type over and over by applying multiple modifications to it. So don't double count your crashes. I mean, in my example that I had here, I split the crashes geographically so that I had my signal crashes in one bin and my median-related crashes in another bin, and they did not, intermix. If I was looking at crash modification factors where I had a higher decrease in fatal crashes, then I would put all my fatal crashes in one bin and subtract them from the overall, and I would reduce those crashes by whatever that modification is, and then my remaining crashes I would reduce by the all crashes modification less my fatal crashes. So do not double count. It's not quite as common, at least in my experience, but you are able to combine CMFs and CRFs. Here's the formula for that. The example is, if you have two improvements, one with a 25% reduction and one with a 15% reduction, is it 40? Do you just add them? And the answer is no. It's actually a 36%. You need to take, it's the inverse of them, multiply them, and then take the. So it's you have to take into account for them, but not sum them up. So know that you don't sum your crash modification factors if you're doing the same improvement, if you're doing multiple improvements in one location and you're looking to fix multiple crashes. So how many fix in our corridor? Looking at that before, I had it up on the screen. The number might have been small, so I kind of blew it up here. The way that this is calculated, the number of correctable crashes, because again, it's how many crashes we fix. That's our benefit. We take our number of crashes and we multiply them by our reduction factor along the sum of them. So the top row would be your 5 crashes in 2013, your 3 crashes in 2014, and your 1 crash in 2015 multiplied by 36% gives you 3.24. You do that along each row, you sum them down, and we end up with 12.11 average preventable correctable crashes per year. When we're doing our benefit costs calculations, we kind of take everything and move it to today, and we do it in so average values by year, so that later when we take the ratio of the benefit over the cost, it's average by year divided by average by year. So we have cancellation units, and we end up with an actual ratio. So the cost per crash, I mean, we know how many crashes. What is the cost for those? There's a few different places where these come from. The Highway Safety Manual has them as well, but I had this handy. This comes from the DOT's crash analysis reporting system. There's a report that gets exported every year that tells you the average crash costs for different crashes depending on the crash rate category of the roadway. We're looking for our particular project here at crash rate category, I believe it's number 36. It's a little bit difficult to see the numbers on there, but that is a suburban 6+ lane 2-way divided painted median. And because this is off the state highway system in District 7, there is, I believe this is statewide, there is a requirement to use 1/2 the crash cost. So taking our 12.11 correctable crashes per year multiplied by 1/2 of the $169,013 that every crash is worth, we end up with a little over $1 million in benefit for this particular project. If we, that's the benefit. So then we need to get the cost and see what we're going to end up with. The 169 is an average. The system that has all the crashes takes the economic loss of time, it takes the insurance, it takes the property damage, the doctor's bills, and it takes all of the actual costs that are associated with each crash along the different roadways and aggregates them and gives you a statewide average for those types of roadways. It's really kind of amazing how it does that. And just for this roadway, if you look at the numbers that are highlighted there on the bottom right, the dollars per crash is 169, and the dollars per injury crash is 167. But the methodology that we use is the dollars per crash, regardless of the injury severity. Then we take the total benefit of $1 million, which was over a 3-year crash history, and we divide it by 3 to get our average annual benefit. So we end up with $341,000 as our average annual benefit for this project along the expanded corridor. This was for the expanded corridor. So estimating the costs, the next topic down, estimating costs is done looking at your structures, your roadways, signing and marking as utilities, maintenance of traffic, mobilization, design, right-of-way, the improvement of the life cycle of that improvement is a factor in here as well, and the capital recovery factor is a measure that we need as well to take the improvement life and the improvement along the life of that and move it over to today's dollars, because again, we want to take the average annual divided by the average annual. The capital recovery factor is just one of those formulas we punch into the equation, and the N is the length, and the I is the interest rate, and we end up with a number. So we just get that equation and punch it in for our for our project, our capital recovery factor is 0.0736. Something that I always like to do at this point, once I have the benefit, because again, my expertise is looking at the crashes, not doing the engineering estimates, is I always like to work backwards using the spreadsheets or the formulas, and I like to know how much of, in today's dollars, improvement is justifiable by the correctable crashes. Those correctable crashes that we looked at over a 20-year life cycle, which is the improvement life of median modifications, if we were to do an improvement, then in today's dollars costs around $2.3 million, we would end up with a benefit cost of greater than 2.0. And 2.0 is the magic number for the DOT for local roads. So using half crash costs and a benefit cost of 2.0, we can justify about a $2.3 million improvement, which is great. I mean, that's a lot of money to work with. So we want to go down. We want to do our engineering estimate and figure out what the number is. But if we come in under $2 million, we're doing pretty well. And I think for this type of project, we definitely would. Service life, real quick. I mean, there's different sources where these come from. Attached to the District 7 benefits spreadsheet, there's a tab that has values for a lot of different service lives, and these are just some of them. Major structures, bridges, things like that have a 30 to 50 year life. Most of your things that are built with concrete, roadway, lanes added, medians, drainage structures, those things have about a 20-year life. Your utility poles and your lighting, things of that nature, have a 15 to 20-year life. Traffic signals, 10 years. Guardrail fencing, things of that nature, around 10 years. Site distance improvements, retiming coordinated systems, 10 years. Traffic signs last a lot less. These are 6 years. And markings and the last 2 years. So these factors are important because basically the longer your improvement life, the longer the amount of time before more money needs to be spent. We can take money now and save lives throughout the entire life of the project. So you want to have a project that has a longer life cycle to maximize that. So the improvement costs, I mean, without getting too much into how I would go about getting some of these numbers, I looked at a similar project that we did in Hillsborough County where we converted a 5-lane section to raised medians like this, and did some improvements along the corridor, and we ended up with around $800,000 per mile for doing that. So in our example, if we want a ballpark estimate, we're looking at around 4,000 feet of project, 0.8 miles. We multiply that by our $850,000, and we've got a $680,000 project, just ballpark figures that we can use, which is great. I mean, that's definitely under 2.3, so we should have a very good benefit cost as we continue along this example here. Our annual improvements, we take that cost multiplied by our capital recovery factor that was calculated earlier by that formula, and that's around 50,439. So we end up with a benefit cost ratio of 6.8. We got a little hooray happy guy with a check mark. 6.8 is great. So this is a good project. I definitely want to pursue this. Look at the crashes in more detail. Go ahead and do a field review. Look at constructability. Do an actual engineering cost estimate. Get our estimates and get everything out there to hone that number down. But if we come anywhere close to $680,000 on our cost estimate, I mean, our BC is going to be 6.8. Even if we're under $2 million, it's going to be a pretty good project. So net present value is the other side of the coin here. According to the Highway Safety Manual, the net present value expresses the difference between the discounted costs and the discounted benefits of a safety improvement project. It's basically the sum of your benefits minus the cost of the project. So rather than giving you a ratio like the benefit cost, this gives you a raw number that tells you kind of the magnitude of the improvement benefit. Another way of looking at it also is the rate at which improvement or your benefit is accrued. So a higher net present value means that you're saving more lives more quickly. I guess is one way of doing it, but you have to spend more money to do that as well. Two basic purposes used to determine which countermeasures provide the most cost-effective means of the countermeasure with the highest net present value. It can also determine if a project is economically justified. One way that I like looking at these is, I lost my train of thought there, but I like the difference between net present value and benefit cost. I like looking at benefit cost as a criteria by which you filter your crashes. It's if you're below a certain net present value, you don't even want to consider the project. And then out of all of your projects that you're considering, if you sort them by net present value, say you've evaluated 10 different projects, and you say, I only want to look at ones that have a greater than 2 BC, those are all great projects, but which one do I do? You then take your projects and you sort them by your net present value, and then that gives you a good sense of which one has, the most economical impact, which is the one with the highest net present value. And this uses a discount rate. It's similar to taking that capital recovery factor, but because of the value of money as it moves across time, the benefit of your project is discounted along the life cycle of it. So you don't get the full benefit the first year as it moves along. There's a spreadsheet that FHWA created that is impossible to read on here. These are the numbers from our actual project. But what this shows you is in orange, it's the improvement cost that comes in. That's the negative number that we're going to subtract from the improvement. And then over the life cycle, over the next 20 green squares as we're coming along, we add to that improvement cost the benefit, and it's a discounted benefit along the 20-year life cycle. You sum all those up, and you end up with your net present value. In our spreadsheet that we use in District 7, we've kind of boiled down this spreadsheet over here into a single cell. And if we assume that we're going to start construction on this project in 2017 and finish it in 2019, we should have about a $3.3 million net present value, which is great. So any other methods? I want to talk about some other ways that things can be done, because I went through an example and talked about one way of looking at it, but there's more ways. If we remember that we were looking at the conflict points and the elimination of the conflict points from 11 to 6, we can get down into the nitty-gritty of actually looking at the data attributes and actually reading police reports and actually diagramming the crashes the way that the police defined them. So there are instances, sometimes it's the preferences of your project manager, where they don't like looking at an overall, hey, let's just do a 30% reduction of all angle crashes and a 40% reduction of side swipes along this corridor and see what we get. There are individuals out there that want to look at an actual collision diagram of your crashes along the corridor. I've segregated the crashes along this corridor. Green are your signal-related crashes, and the black ones are your median crashes. And in the zoom in there, for example, that is at a driveway. If we had a median going through this segment, I mean, that angle crash that occurred on 4/15/13, April 15th, it would not have occurred because the car that was coming out of the driveway would have been not able to do that. They wouldn't have been able to make that movement at all. The same thing for the vehicle that was coming out of the car wash on February 24th. That crash would have been impossible to do. So there is a methodology for doing this whereby you would look at the actual crashes and say, well, I'm going to fix that crash, I'm going to fix this crash, I'm going to fix this crash. So rather than looking at holistically by crash types, you would count the actual crashes that you would fix by the actual improvement and say, well, this corridor represents a sample of crash data, and these are the actual crashes that I'm fixing. So this is my crash modification factor. These are the crashes that I'm correcting along the corridor, and that would be a different methodology, but it would not be incorrect because, I mean, those are the actual crashes that you would fix for this actual improvement going along it, So that leads me to one of the most important things for this entire process of doing benefit cost calculations, and that is to document your assumptions. If nothing else you retain out of me going through this example and doing this process, it is that you want to be in the habit of always documenting where things come from. You want to document your description. This is out of our form, but I mean, I've generated entire Word documents that go separate from the form that is here's all of assumptions, here's the process, here's what's going on. You document your description, your cause of your crashes, your proposed improvements, your crash reduction method, and your high crash listings. The crash reduction method, again, I mean, that's the place where you would write things like, using 1/2 of the crash cost of crash rate category number 34, suburban 6-lane divided highway, for the year 2012 through 2013, replacing a two-way left turn lane from the CMF clearinghouse yields a 36% reduction of angle, 19% reduction of rear ends, 21% reduction of side swipes. Adding an additional primary signal head yields a 28% reduction of rear end crashes and a 15% reduction of other signal-related crashes. So you want to document where your numbers come from. If I was given a spreadsheet that had numbers and values like the ones that I proposed earlier to review and evaluate, and I was not giving a list of assumptions, I mean, I would have to go into the CMF clearinghouse and read the 6 possible improvements and kind of go through the thought process myself and try to figure out, which one is being used and why. There's engineering judgment involved in these, and if you don't document those assumptions, the next person on the line that's going to review this information is not going to know where those came from. And it's sometimes as simple as, hey, we did a project, we saying your client or the DOT or whoever it is that's doing this, we did a similar project 3 years ago, and at the time it was determined that we want to use a 10% reduction of all crashes. So your crash reduction method would say, per the district safety engineer, for this location we're going to use a 10% reduction of all crashes, and then you go over to your thing and you put 10% reduction, and that's how you're going along it. So it's just documenting the things along the way. Super important. The BC sheet looks like this. We have one in District 7 that we developed. I mean, it has all the I've shown throughout the presentation different zoom-ins of different sections of this report. That's the entirety of the BC sheet for a single location, and it is editable. I mean, you can add rows and kind of move things around if you need to, but this is for a single location. We've also modified that sheet and have taken. I know this is impossible to read, but just know that you can do this with the spreadsheets. I've taken the sheets and basically all of the yellow cells in this one that are fields that calculate and fields that are filled out. In this sheet, one row represents an entire one of the other sheets. So here we're looking at about a dozen BC sheets all in one table. And this is fantastic for evaluating a corridor. There's another project that we're looking at in St. Petersburg that's for bulb outs along intersections in downtown. So it's not one big project where you're looking at all the crashes in one location. We're kind of looking at them as individual little projects that are along corridors. So we have for every intersection a single row, and then we look at the crashes and the improvement and everything, individually itemized along the project. So home stretch here with the things that I have prepared for you guys. We want to justify our funds. I mean, it's safety grants and funds. It's prioritization. That's where all this stuff is used. All the benefit cost calculations, the net present values. It's to get to this information. Particularly if you're a local agency and you're looking to go to DOT to say, hey, we have a project. If you're in District 7, you've got the HSIP process. If you're outside of District 7, work with your safety engineers. But this is what you do. You have your correctable crashes. That's the key. It's not just don't go down a rabbit hole where before you even begin looking at things, you just start doing collision diagrams, start reading reports, looking at data, doing tables. It's begin with that end in mind and look at your actual improvement and see what the improvement is and whether or not it makes sense, and you want to look in detail at the crashes that are correctable, not just at everything. Do not double count your crashes. Really important when you're looking at the benefit cost spreadsheets, that it's not just you can't correct the same crash twice. Watch out for negative reductions. Negative reductions are increases in crashes, and that's okay. I mean, if you have a location where an improvement has a negative reduction, you have to take it into account. You need to put it in the spreadsheet. Hopefully, there's only a few of those crashes, and you don't negate your entire improvement by that. But I mean, that's the name of the game. There are some modifications out there that actually increase crashes due to the nature of them. Picking the appropriate crash reduction. I mean, we went through the whole section in the clearinghouse, showing the example with the raised medians. Whether that's the installing or providing or replacing, and document your crash reduction method. Again, I mean, the most important thing, the takeaway for this is to document all your assumptions. Keep in mind strategic priorities like highway safety improvement plan. When you're looking at your crash data, like that high crash listing section in the report is a great place to put, oh, by the way, this location has X number of aggressive driving crashes, X number of lane departure, and these are all things that work towards the highway safety improvement program. And with better data, we can make better decisions. So know your crash data, know your project, know your improvement, know your crash data management system also. I mean, there's an entire webinars on how to select crashes. But here in the office, anytime that we're given a project, we kind of go above and beyond what we need to get the number of crashes. If it's on the state highway system, I mean, we'll use our crash data management system to select the crashes by section number milepost and see how many crashes are along that segment, knowing that you have crashes that are influenced by the intersection of other state roads along the corridor, so you kind of need to grab them by those section numbers as well. We draw a geographic polygon around the corridor as well to select the crashes by their associated node, as well as by the XY, by the lat long that comes out of the crashes. We'll go into DOT's mainframe and QC our section number milepost selection by grabbing the crashes off of there, and we'll go into Signal 4 and QC our polygon selection by pulling the crashes there just to see if the numbers match. And there's reasons why sometimes one is higher than the other, but know your data management system, whatever your source is. Know the ins and outs of what it is that you're asking and what the results are, because it'll wildly vary with your calculations. If you can identify a couple of extra crashes, if you're only looking at short forms and you can get, if you're only looking at long forms and you can get some short forms added to that, then that's beneficial. Crash data queries are both an art and a science. I mean, like I mentioned, we go by XY, we go by node, we go by section number of mileposts. Each of them has benefits to the other, and we just kind of cast a wide net and see all your crashes and then filter out your false positives. That's my mantra, is always casting a wide net to make sure you maximize your benefit, but then you need to filter out your false positives. So it's a little more accurate, but it takes more work. There may not be a cookie cutter solution, that magical 15% reduction of all crashes by installing backplates. That's great, but I mean, I don't know that that's the best approach to doing benefit cost calculations, and there's not a cookie cutter. Every location is unique, and it takes judgment to figure out what improvements are being used. Getting a complete picture sometimes takes creativity. Selection of your crashes requires judgment, and if you have any questions, there's plenty of very helpful people that can help out. Start with your safety engineer at your district. Contact them for questions, tips, and helps. And with that, I'll open it to questions. I've been watching the chat, and I don't see that there have been any questions. Oh, you know what? There have been questions. I've been monitoring the chat between tonight and it's between presenters and us. So we'll have a Q&A section here. First question, just curious to get clarification on who developed the CDMS and if it is available working on behalf of different. I'm getting some feedback. Someone
Yeah,
has.
you're breaking up. Something.
Oh, I'm breaking up.
Yeah, it was something that's feeding back in the system. Go ahead.
Let me make sure that I'm okay. Yeah, I don't know. You're on the computer. But, okay. The question again was curious to get clarification on who developed the CDMS and if it is available for other consultants working on behalf of different municipalities. The crash data management system was developed in-house by us at Tyndall Oliver. We have programmers that work for us at our engineering firm. We're not in the business of selling software. We do engineering services, so it's kind of a question for somebody that's above my pay grade to answer. If it's available to other consultants. I know that we have granted access in the past to our sub-consultants if we're working on studies with them, and at the district level, our partner or our sister district-wide contract engineering firm that's working with them, the other contract, we grant them access as well. So our local agents are granted access, and sometimes their consultants are as well. But we kind of have to be doing work for them in order for us to have the data and be able to grant that as a private firm. They don't grant us access to the data unless we're under contract with them. So shoot me an email that I can get you a hold of the right people if you'd like to pursue that question. Seeing if you are implementing a traffic signal at a location where you have rear end and angle crashes, would you use the CMF for both, thus decreasing angle crashes but increasing rear ends? Yes, absolutely. That's the name of the game. We need to be fair when we're doing our selection of our crash modification factors and not just pick the ones that give us the most increases and ignore the most decreases, and ignore the ones that give us any increases. It's kind of rare to have a location that is not signalized, just some random intersection along a corridor mid-block somewhere that has a lot of angle crashes. So, I think in that example, you're not going to find a location that has a lot of rear ends that also has a lot of angles. But that would be kind of unfortunate if it was trying to be funded by safety, federal funds through highway safety improvement. Then it would be unfortunate if you had enough rear end crashes at a location that you're trying to signalize with safety funds that you would negate your entire project because you're increasing crashes, which could happen. You would probably be able to work with your district safety engineer to figure some things out with that. What I would look for in those locations would be the severity of the crashes. I've seen a few projects where they allow the severity of the crashes to be the crashes themselves to be multiplied by a severity factor to kind of elevate the fact that you have fatal and severe injury angle crashes that would be corrected, and you would have property damage crashes that would be increased. I think that's generally okay, but that's a tricky one. But yeah, you would have to use both. Please discuss the timeline of modifications. For example, adding a signal might increase the rear end crashes, but I suspect that's only temporary. But reduction of broadside crashes will be permanent. Well, that's interesting. With two questions about the same topic. I wish I would have gotten these questions as I was in that slide before. But no, that's if you look at historically, any signalized intersection, and you were to diagram them and look at the angle crashes per year and rear end crashes per year. Traffic signalized intersections have a fairly steady number of rear end crashes along them. I would agree with you that perhaps in the first year you would have a larger increase, and then it would decrease slightly. But it would, like if you had 2 rear end crashes and then you signalized it and you ended up with 30 rear end crashes in year 1, you would maybe have 25 in year 2 and 25 in year 3 and 25 in year 4 as you're going along. So you would have a slightly higher jump, and then it would remain steady. Fact of the matter is that, I mean, drivers just aren't paying attention. They're on their cell phones, they're catching Pokemon, they're doing whatever it is they're doing on the road, and the light turns red and traffic stops in front of you and you don't stop. And any time that traffic stops in front of you, that can happen, and that happens very frequently at a traffic signal as it's changing. So yeah, I mean, I would expect rear end crashes to be sustained at a signalized intersection. Where can we obtain the current cost per crash? I can provide a spreadsheet of that and put it as one of the resources on the web page, or send you an email with them. But I have access as a consultant to the DOT to their crash analysis reporting system, the CARS mainframe, and I'm able to export that. The most official record set of DOT's data is 2014. So you could get a 3 or a 5 year history with 2014 crashes being the most recent. The Highway Safety Manual as well has cost per crash, and they're very, very similar. They may in fact be the same. I don't have a Highway Safety Manual in front of me, but that's a location where you can get them as well. Why do we ignore injury severity? According to EPA, the value of a statistical life is greater than $167,000. Yes, this is a point of contention that we've had discussions about this, and the point that I think makes it very difficult is when trying to justify a pedestrian or bicycle improvement, because pedestrian and bicycle crashes are not as concentrated as vehicular crashes. I mean, you'll have an intersection that has 5 angle crashes per year, and that's not terribly uncommon. If you have 5 bicycle and pedestrian crashes a year at an intersection, I mean, we would have known about it and fixed it already. That's an awful lot of bike ped crashes to be located in one location, and the current methodologies, I mean, that's the crash cost. That's the methodology that DOT and FHWA uses. I mean, it's out of the Highway Safety Manual. The actual crash, I can bring it up and tell you what the number is for a fatal crash. It's like in the millions. If we could, and I guess that's just the other side of the coin too. If we could use $1 million for every fatal crash, then we could basically justify anything at a location as long as it has one fatal crash, and that's not really a business that we want to be in either. We want to be fair and justify the crashes and find the places that have the most number of crashes. Crash stats, crash location summaries. And this is the full report here. It has, there should be right at the top. Oh, I'm sorry, I brought up the wrong report. Give me a second. That's the crash stats. That's not the. State roads. Segment crash rates. The segment crash rate report out of CAR, and this matches what's out there in the Highway Safety Manual. That a property damage crash is worth about $7,000. A possible injury is worth $97,000. Working backwards, a fatal crash is worth $10 million. An incapacitating crash is worth $580,000. An injury is worth $157,000. A possible injury is worth $97,000, and a property damage only is worth $7,000. So I mean, it's huge. $10,000 is humongous. But when you take the average for all crashes, all crash rate categories, all crashes, all roads, you end up with 143. 143 is the number that you use, if you don't know the type of roadway, or if you're looking at a sort of a systemic we're going to do this improvement in 20 locations, and I just want to prioritize which ones to do first before I get into too much detail and actually look at the individuals. But that's to use 143. That's for all locations. What did that suggest? Serious deviations. These are existing crashes. Would you predict crashes for the project life to estimate an accurate or higher VC? Yeah, I mean that's kind of the question is, why am I not predicting the crashes in the future? It's because the benefit of the improvement is the reduction of the crashes that are happening now. There will continue to be crashes along the corridor, regardless of the improvement, because humans are driving cars until we're all in a self-driving Google car. I think that we're going to continue having crashes on the roads. So the way that it works is that you look at the existing, a 5-year historical crash data. This is historical crash methods. If you're looking at the Highway Safety Manual and you're looking at predictive models, then yeah, you can definitely predict. Then you can say, well, out of these 3 scenarios, using the predictive tools, if we modify it to look like this is how many crashes we expect. And the difference between today and that would be the number of crashes that you would fix, hopefully fix, not increase. And then, your second scenario, if you're looking at your type of median or your shoulder type or whatever it is, using those predictive models in the Highway Safety Manual, then you would predict your crashes before the improvement is made to compare and see which way you wanted to go with it. In the example that I gave, as we were going along this, I mean, we kind of knew what the answer was. We're not going to touch the shoulders, and we're going to go with raised medians, with 2-way left turn lanes and some protected crossings. So the improvement is going to remain, and by that improvement remaining, then we reduce the crashes that are happening historically. So we wouldn't predict the crashes. Hopefully that answers that question. I don't know if I feel like I talked in a circle when I answered that question. Any other questions in the chat? I'm not seeing anything at the moment, so I'll give folks a few minutes to see if anybody else has any questions. I don't know if anybody would like to speak. I can always unmute someone as well. Any of our other past presenters, experts in Highway Safety Manual, that want to add a few things to that, because I know that I talked about that very briefly. As people are typing their questions, I'll go ahead and say that the next webinar is September 21st. That is applying safety data analysis and performance-based transportation planning. After that is October 19th and November 16th. These are the upcoming webinar topics. Your PDH forms from Dennis's presentation, in case you didn't catch that, they go to Mr. Larry Hagan. He takes care of those things, and you receive 1 PDH credit for today's session. Again, this information is located in the Tampa Bay Traffic Safety webpage that is accessible from the link that you received in your email. This session has been submitted for AICP credit as well. And here's my contact information in case anybody has any further questions or points of discussion, wants to know more about CDMS, or wants some of those spreadsheets that I showed, or data tables and whatnot.
This is Dennis Falloon. I just wanted to restate my request earlier that if any of you that are attendees would like to recommend or suggest a topic that needs to be revisited, that we presented before, or you have something new that we have not covered or addressed, just email them to me. And if you have any suggested presenters, if it includes yourself, that's fine. Like Anthony mentioned too, that we look for folks outside of the normal presenters that we have and everything, and let you know the next 2 presentations will be given by folks from FHWA outside of the state of Florida. So we try to get it as diverse as possible with the presenters. So I don't see any other questions in the or anything in the chat, Anthony.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, with that, I'll go ahead and end the recording, and I'll stay on the line for a few minutes. And if any other questions come up, or if anybody wants to say